welcome to the deep dive. If you're joining us today, you're likely someone who wants to understand the underlying currents of our culture.
Right.
Maybe you're prepping for a debate, or maybe you're just insanely curious about the radical frameworks that are quietly shaping modern relationship dynamics right under our noses.
Exactly. The stuff people don't talk about openly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So today we are looking at a text specifically written for a red-pilled men's rights activist audience.
And it is intense.
It really is. It's an exploration of how institutions, family structures, and interpersonal dynamics operated, or at least how the author believes they operated, before what he describes as their total capture by feminist and Marxist ideology.
Which is a massive premise to start with.
Huge. But before we get started, please make sure to like and subscribe to the show. It really helps us keep bringing you these incredibly detailed deep dives.
It makes a big difference.
It does. Okay, so let's unpack this. The source material we have in front of us today is undoubtedly one of the most polarizing, unfiltered, and provocative texts we have ever encountered on this show.
Unfiltered is putting it mildly.
Yeah, we are going to be thoroughly examining a new ebook titled Whip Her Into Shape. And the subtitle is Address and Resolve the Obese, Disobedient, and Disrespectful by Conrad Riker.
A title that immediately tells you exactly where we're going.
Right. And for those of you who want to read the source material directly, to see these arguments for yourself, you can find the ebook right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
The author also heavily directs his readers to his Substack.
Yes, which you can find at Conrad and Riker. So our mission for you today is to unpack the underlying psychology, the evolutionary arguments, and the highly radical relationship frameworks presented in this book.
And before we go a single step further into this material, I need to establish a very firm, very clear boundary for you, the listener.
Yeah, please do.
The contents of this book are highly politically charged. Throughout the text, the author aggressively and systematically critiques modern egalitarianism, feminism, and what he views as modern therapy culture.
Which is basically the standard operating procedure for relationships today.
Exactly. So we need to make it absolutely unequivocally clear that we are not taking sides today. We are not endorsing nor are we condemning the viewpoints of the author.
Right.
Our job here is to impartially report on the ideas, to analyze the author's framework, and to help you understand the arguments exactly as they are presented in the original source material.
Just laying out the architecture of his worldview.
Precisely. We are looking at this strictly through an analytical lens to understand the worldview the author is presenting to his specific audience without applying our own ethical judgments.
I'm really glad we laid that groundwork because, the very foundation of this book requires the reader to completely abandon the way modern society views relationships.
It's a total paradigm shift.
Yeah. The text opens with a total, unapologetic rejection of equality, asserting instead what the author refers to as the natural order.
Which he capitalizes in the text.
Right, it's a formal concept for him. The core premise here is that equality in a marriage isn't just difficult to achieve. He argues that it is a complete myth. And worse, that the pursuit of it actively breeds chaos.
He writes that neither civilization nor nature operates on compromise.
No. In his view, they operate exclusively on hierarchy, duty, and strength.
And he really wastes no time grounding this philosophy in biological and evolutionary justifications. He doesn't present this as just a traditionalist opinion,
Right, it's not a moral argument for him.
Exactly. He frames it as a hardwired biological imperative that we ignore at our peril. To build this case for his reader, he leans heavily on animal kingdom analogies.
Which brings us to the baboons.
Yes. A major cornerstone of his early argument revolves around a very specific event from 1989 involving a baboon troop in the Nairobi National Park.
Right, the tuberculosis outbreak. So walk me through the logic here. He takes a localized disease outbreak in a primate troop and uses that as a direct proxy for human marital dynamics.
He does.
How does he bridge that massive biological gap for the reader?
It is a massive leap, but here's the psychological math he uses to get his audience there. According to his recounting of the event, this specific baboon troop lost the vast majority of its dominant, aggressive alpha males.
Because they were the ones eating from the garbage dump, right?
Exactly. A tainted garbage dump infected with tuberculosis. So what survived were the lower status, non-aggressive males.
The beta males, essentially.
Right. And the author points out that researchers observing the troop initially labeled the aftermath a peaceful utopia. There was no fighting, no dominance displays, and the baboons were sharing food equally.
Which sounds great on paper.
But the author zeroes in on the long-term biological result to make his point.
And that result, according to the text, was a complete demographic collapse.
Precisely. The author emphasizes that within 2 years of this egalitarian shift, infant mortality within the troop completely skyrocketed.
It tripled, I think he said.
It tripled. He argues that without the aggressive, dominant males to maintain order and protect the perimeter, the females existed in a constant state of neurological anxiety.
So they were basically hypervigilant all the time.
Yes. They stopped forming proper maternal bonds with their offspring because they were entirely consumed by environmental threat detection.
Wow.
It was only when new, aggressive, dominant males eventually migrated into the troop, violently restoring the hierarchy, that the infant survival rates normalized.
And then he distills this entire sequence down to a highly provocative catchphrase for his readers.
Yes, he says equality kills babies.
Equality kills babies. So he is fundamentally arguing that nature requires rigid structure, dominance, and a capacity for aggression to ensure the survival of offspring.
Yes, and that emotional affirmation or shared power is basically a biological death sentence.
But primates are one thing. How does he map that specific survival dynamic onto human sociology?
He brings up the Hadza tribe of Tanzania to illustrate what this looks like in a functioning human hunter-gatherer context.
Okay, what's the dynamic there?
The author describes the mechanics of a successful hunt. The lead hunter will track and kill a wildebeest, walk into camp, and drop the carcass.
Right.
The women of the tribe immediately begin to butcher and prepare the meat, and when it is cooked, the lead hunter is fed first.
The absolute first cut.
Always. The author stresses that there is no debate here. There is no town hall discussion about dividing the calories equally, and there is no resentment.
And he explicitly frames this by telling his readers that's not patriarchy, that's logistics.
Exactly.
That's a fascinating reframe. By calling it logistics, he completely strips away the political lens of oppression.
He takes the morality right out of it.
He does. He is telling his audience that what modern society calls toxic masculinity or patriarchal control is actually just the most efficient operating system for human survival.
Exactly. He uses this Hansa example to argue that what women actually fear on a biological level isn't male authority, it is uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Right. And if you follow the evolutionary psychology thread that he is weaving, you eventually arrive at his reference to Jordan Peterson's lobsters.
Of course, the lobsters.
The author brings up the idea that dominant male lobsters have higher serotonin levels, which dictates their posture and their status in the hierarchy.
And Riker takes this concept and applies it directly to human neurochemistry.
Yes, he claims that dominant human males function on the exact same serotonin-driven hierarchy.
And more importantly, that women are biologically tuned like a radar to detect and submit to this high-status serotonin signature.
That is the core of it. This means he is arguing that attraction isn't a choice, it's an involuntary response to a neurochemical signal of dominance.
So according to this framework, women do not actually want a sensitive, accommodating partner who seeks their validation?
Not at all. In this worldview, neediness is anti-status.
Because if we look at it through the lens of our evolutionary past, which the author constantly references, mating with a weak or submissive man meant your descendants simply wouldn't survive the winter.
Therefore, accommodating behavior from a man triggers a biological revulsion in women.
Biological revulsion. That brings us to a concept that he spends a massive amount of time on, which is hypergamy.
A huge buzzword in this space.
Very much so. For you listening, if you aren't familiar with the terminology of this specific subculture, hypergamy is the idea that women are biologically wired to trade up.
Right, to always seek the better option.
It is the assertion that a woman will always seek the absolute best provider and the highest status male available to her, regardless of her current relationship status.
And the author frames this not as a moral failing, but as an instinctual, unstoppable reflex.
So to validate this claim of hypergamy for his readers, the author turns to data, or at least his interpretation of it.
He leans on an OkCupid data dump from 2014 that analyzed over 50 million swipes on the dating platform.
Okay, what did he pull from that?
The author claims this data reveals that 87% of women only swiped right on men who earned above the median income.
Wow, 87%.
Yeah. He pairs this modern digital data with David Buss's famous 1989 cross-cultural studies.
Right, the evolutionary psychologist.
Exactly. Buss looked at 37 different cultures around the globe, and the author uses this to argue that across all cultures, regardless of politics or geography, Women consistently prioritize status, resources, and earning potential in a mate far more than men do.
So the logic equation he is building for the reader is a woman isn't rejecting you because you are poor. She is rejecting you because poverty is a biological signal of low evolutionary fitness.
That's the translation.
He drives this concept home with a very specific, highly memorable anecdote about an IT worker in Leeds. Walk us through how he uses this story to prove the ruthlessness of hypergamy.
So the author describes this IT worker making about 42,000 pounds a year.
A decent living.
Yeah, he's comfortable, he wears hoodies, he plays video games, and he thinks he has a stable, modern marriage based on love.
Right, the modern ideal.
But his wife ends up having an affair with her gym trainer.
Classic trope.
And the author paints a very specific picture of this trainer. He drives a flashy car, he has a six-figure side hustle selling supplements, he exudes physical dominance.
Okay.
The author points out that the wife didn't care if the trainer was emotionally shallow or unfaithful to others.
Huh.
He simply looked and acted like a winner.
His serotonin signature was higher.
Exactly. So her biological programming kicked in, and she traded up.
But the crucial part of this anecdote is how the husband reacts, right?
Yeah.
Because according to the author, the husband didn't do what modern therapy would suggest.
Not at all.
He didn't cry, he didn't beg for her back, and he didn't ask her to go to couples counseling.
Correct. The author praises the husband for cutting off his emotional response.
He's going totally cold.
Completely. Instead of begging, the husband poured all of his energy into upgrading his own status.
He leveled up.
He retrained in cybersecurity, he jumped his salary to 75,000 pounds, and eventually hit 98,000.
More than double.
He started lifting weights and entirely transformed his physical and financial footprint.
And the payoff of the anecdote is that when he finally packed his bags to officially move out and finalize the divorce, the wife broke down and begged him to stay.
And the macro insight the author extracts from this for the reader is brutally cynical.
Yeah, what is the takeaway he wants men to have here?
He tells his audience that loyalty is purely transactional, never emotional.
Transactional loyalty.
Yes, she stayed when she thought the trainer was the peak of what she could get. And she begged the husband to stay only when she realized his market value had surpassed the trainer's.
That is the foundational pill the author demands his readers swallow.
He is systematically dismantling the reader's romanticized view of partnership.
He wants them to view love not as a soulmate connection, but as a ruthless, ongoing biological marketplace.
And that leads directly into how you survive in that marketplace.
Right, because if a reader accepts this premise that he is operating in a ruthless biological marketplace where his partner is constantly subconsciously scanning for a higher status option, how does the author suggest a man actually govern his daily relationship?
Because you can't just be constantly fighting off gym trainers.
No, you'd be exhausted. This brings up the concept of establishing the frame and asserting unilateral leadership.
Yes. The frame is arguably the most vital psychological concept in this entire ecosystem.
Let's define that for the listener.
In this subculture, holding the frame means that you own the narrative of reality within the relationship. You are the immovable object.
The author dictates that a man must absolutely never negotiate his core values, his schedule, or his demands.
The psychological mechanism here is that strong men do not seek permission to lead. They simply assume authority, and the environment forms around them.
He uses the analogy of a ship's captain.
It's a very vivid analogy.
He says the captain doesn't ask the crew where they feel like sailing today. He sets the coordinates, and the crew's anxiety is alleviated because someone is firmly at the helm.
Someone is in charge.
Right. And one of the most provocative behavioral modifications the author prescribes to establish this frame is what he calls the apology fast.
Yes, the apology fast.
He literally instructs men to completely stop saying the word sorry.
It is a radical instruction, but he provides an analytical corporate backing for it.
Which is interesting, applying corporate theory to marriage.
He does it constantly.
Yeah.
Here, he cites a 2021 study from the Harvard Business Review.
Okay, what does the study say?
Now, while we don't have the study in front of us to verify its methodology, the author claims this research shows that men who apologize less frequently at home are viewed as 41% more reliable and competent by their spouses.
So he is taking a business management study about leadership perception and weaponizing it for domestic life. What is the psychological math behind refusing to apologize for being late or forgetting a chore? I mean, standard relationship advice says you apologize to repair the bond.
The author argues that in the context of hypergamy, remorse is viewed by the female subconscious as a surrender of status.
A surrender of status.
Right. When a man makes a mistake, say working late without calling and the wife gets upset. If the man apologizes, he is validating her emotional reaction.
He's stepping into her frame.
Yes, he is confirming that she has the power to control his behavior through guilt.
Wow.
By instituting the apology fast, the man breaks that feedback loop. He demonstrates that his mission, his work, or his decisions supersede her emotional comfort, thereby reestablishing his higher status.
To really cement how extreme this application of frame can be, he shares a story about a man from Minnesota that honestly reads like a psychological thriller.
It is one of the most intense stories in the book.
Let's look at this anecdote because it perfectly illustrates the refusal to negotiate reality.
So the text describes a man who comes home after a grueling 12-hour shift.
Okay.
He had prepared a high-quality, medium-rare smoked paprika ribeye steak and left it in the fridge.
Very specific detail.
Yes. But because he came home late, his wife, who was furious at his lack of communication, took the perfectly cooked steak and threw it directly into the garbage.
Now, in almost any modern relationship context, this would trigger a massive argument.
Absolutely.
Voices would be raised, accusations of disrespect would fly, and it would likely end in some sort of tense negotiation or apology. But what does the author say the man did?
The man does absolutely nothing that would validate her anger.
Nothing.
He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't ask her why she did it. He doesn't demand an apology.
So what does he do?
Instead, he walks silently to the bedroom, packs a duffel bag, and retrieves his grandfather's .38 revolver from a safe.
Wait, he pulled a gun?
He takes the gun, he walks out the door, drives to a Holiday Inn Express, and checks himself in.
Just the inclusion of the firearm in the story escalates the tension incredibly.
It absolutely does.
He doesn't threaten her with it, but the implication of him packing a weapon and leaving creates a massive psychological void.
That is the exact mechanism of control being utilized. He initiates total radio silence.
He just ghosts her.
He doesn't text her, he doesn't answer her calls. He sits in that hotel room for 3 entire days.
3 days over a steak.
The author frames this as the ultimate test of wills. The man is essentially communicating, my reality does not include a woman who throws away my food. I am fully prepared to end this marriage right now.
And what's the effect on the wife, according to the book?
The silence creates a vacuum, and the wife's anxiety over the loss of his protection and resources allegedly overtakes her anger.
And the resolution of the story is that on the 3rd day, she sends him a photo of a brand new, fresh ribeye sizzling in a cast iron skillet.
She capitulates entirely.
He comes home, eats the steak in total silence, and the author claims that this silent standoff fundamentally saved the marriage.
And the macro insight here for the reader is clear. Women do not respect apologies or negotiations. They only respect the absolute certainty of consequences.
The certainty of consequences, that's heavy.
It is. And the author takes this idea of nonverbal behavioral correction and elevates it to a macro level, advocating for what he calls rituals of dominance.
Rituals of dominance.
He diagnoses the failure of modern marriage as a lack of sacred structured rites that, in his words, burn weakness out of the frame.
Burn weakness out of the frame.
He believes that without ritualized hierarchy, a relationship devolves into endless, exhausting negotiation.
He looks globally to make this point, right? He pulls from traditional, non-Western cultures to prove that structured dominance is historically the norm.
Yes, he does a lot of cross-cultural cherry-picking here.
He discusses the Balinese Maluka purification rite. He notes a specific variation where the husband walks across glowing embers to demonstrate physical stoicism, while the wife is required to stand silently on the sidelines with her eyes lowered in deference.
He also points to the Dogon people of Mali.
What's their ritual?
According to the author, they utilize something called a hut of silence. Once a month, the wife is required to sit inside this designated hut for 12 uninterrupted hours.
Just totally isolated.
During this period of mandatory isolation and silence,
Yeah.
the husband assumes total control of the household,
Taking over everything.
making all unilateral decisions regarding finances, property, and the children. The author claims that the divorce rate among the Dogon is virtually zero, attributing this stability directly to the regular ritualized reaffirmation of male authority.
It's one thing to observe remote cultures, but how does he expect a modern man living in a Western city to implement a ritual of dominance? I mean, we don't have huts of silence in the suburbs.
Right. He provides a very stark modern equivalent involving a Navy SEAL living in Virginia.
Okay, let's hear this one.
This man runs his household like a military unit. Every Sunday morning, he conducts a command briefing in his living room.
A literal command briefing.
He actually puts on his uniform, stands at the head of the room for 10 minutes, and reviews the upcoming week's schedule, logistics, and household assignments.
And the wife.
His wife is required to stand at attention during this briefing and acknowledge each directive by saying, "Yes, sir."
Yes, sir. The author draws a massive contrast here. He compares this Navy SEAL's rigid, hierarchical living room to the image of modern Western couples sitting in therapy circles, holding hands, sharing their vulnerabilities, and negotiating who is going to do the dishes.
And he argues that the therapy model is fundamentally flawed because it creates a power vacuum.
Because no one is definitively in charge.
Right. When everything is up for negotiation, both partners are constantly exhausted trying to assert their needs.
So, by instituting a ritual of dominance, the author argues that respect and hierarchy are wired directly into the nervous system of the daily grind.
The wife doesn't have to wonder who is in charge, which, going back to his baboon analogy, supposedly alleviates her biological anxiety.
Alleviates the anxiety by removing the burden of choice. If he is advocating for total psychological control over the narrative of the relationship, it naturally follows that he would demand control over the practical resources as well.
Oh, absolutely. The finances are heavily policed.
The framework pivots heavily into household management, focusing on financial dominion and dismantling what he calls the servant king fallacy.
Financial control is paramount in this worldview. The author does not view a woman earning her own money as a sign of modern progress.
Not at all. He explicitly labels financial independence for wives as a Trojan horse.
The Trojan horse.
He argues that it is sold by society as empowerment and freedom, but what it actually delivers to the household is crushing debt and eventual divorce.
Right.
Walk me through his rationale there. Why does equal access to money inevitably lead to divorce in his framework?
He relies again on evolutionary social signaling.
Okay.
His premise is that women are biologically driven to signal their status to other women.
So it's about competition with other females.
Exactly. Therefore, if you give a woman equal access to joint accounts or her own limitless credit card, you are unleashing a biological impulse for immediate gratification that she is not evolutionarily designed to regulate.
That is a harsh assessment.
He claims she will inevitably spend resources on luxury items, aesthetics, and social signaling rather than long-term security.
So to combat this unchecked biological impulse, he demands that men institute incredibly strict systems of verification.
Verification is the word he uses over and over.
We are talking about forensic level auditing of the household finances. He introduces the $100 rule,
Yes.
which dictates that a wife is absolutely forbidden from making any purchase over $100 without prior consultation and explicit approval from the husband.
And it goes further than just asking permission. He suggests implementing a receipt jar.
A physical jar in the house.
This is a physical system of accountability. If the wife makes an unapproved purchase, no matter how small, she is forced to write a 500-word essay explaining her financial disobedience.
A 500-word essay, like a school child in detention.
Exactly. He even advises his readers to require their wives to text them photographic evidence of their receipts before they are allowed to leave a store.
Before they leave the store. The insight here isn't just about saving a few dollars, it's about creating friction.
Deliberate friction.
By forcing his audience to view financial independence as a Trojan horse, the author is systematically dismantling the reader's trust in his partner's autonomy.
Trust is replaced by process.
The goal is to replace a cooperative financial partnership with a paranoid, closed loop of surveillance. He gives a very clear example of why he feels this extreme surveillance is justified with the story of a crypto trader in Miami.
Yes, the text recounts this Miami trader discovering that his wife had secretly spent $9,000 of their money on spiritual healing crystals, tarot cards, and malabeads without ever consulting him.
$9,000 on crystals.
The husband's reaction wasn't to cut up the credit cards and yell. It was to institute a corporate-level reporting policy.
What did that look like?
Every single purchase over $50 required a receipt to be submitted to him within 24 hours for review.
And the result, he claims?
They saved $28,000 in 6 months.
$28,000. So the lesson the author imparts to the reader is that financial disobedience equates directly to marital disobedience.
If she doesn't respect your money, she doesn't respect your frame.
Establishing ironclad financial control is presented as the very foundation of household stability.
And this leads us directly into the concept of domestic labor, or what the author calls the servant king fallacy.
This is where he flips conventional advice on its head entirely.
He really does. Modern relationship advice constantly tells men to step up, do their fair share of chores, and take on the mental load of running a house.
Happy wife, happy life, right?
Exactly. But Riker tells his readers to do the exact opposite. He tells men to completely reject the concept of emotional labor, calling it a feminist con designed specifically to monetize male responsibility.
He instructs his readers to abruptly stop folding laundry, stop planning date nights, and stop asking their wives where they want to eat.
Just stop doing all of it cold turkey.
The psychological equation he builds here is that acting as a collaborative house manager turns a man into an invisible husband or an indentured servant.
So, author's premise, women desire high-status men. Doing domestic chores signals subservience. Subservience kills biological attraction.
Right.
Therefore, doing the dishes literally causes divorce.
Doing the dishes causes divorce. That is precisely the logical progression he uses.
He asserts that women quickly lose all biological respect for men who perform domestic duties like, in his words, a trained monkey.
To illustrate this, he tells the story of an ER doctor living in New York.
Yes, this guy is working grueling shifts, right? Coming home at 3 a.m.
Exactly, coming home exhausted from saving lives, only to find himself fixing the Wi-Fi router or assembling IKEA furniture while his wife drinks tea and complains to him about how overwhelming her emotional labor is.
The dynamic had completely inverted.
So, following Riker's framework, the doctor abruptly refused to do it anymore. He instituted a hard boundary.
What did he tell her?
He told his wife that if she wanted a new shelving unit built, she needed to go to the hardware store, learn how to use a power drill, and build it herself.
The text claims her initial reaction was exactly what you'd expect. She cried, she called him toxic, she accused him of being unsupportive.
But what was the long-term result, according to the book?
The author claims that within 6 weeks, the dynamic completely shifted. She bought her own power tools, she struggled through building the furniture herself, and as a result of him holding his ground and refusing to serve her, their sex life was supposedly reignited to a massive degree.
So by refusing to help, he became more attractive.
That is the analytical takeaway the author pushes. Male competence and stoicism are attractive, while male subservience and dependency are fundamentally repulsive to the female biological drive.
We've talked about how he demands control over the household finances and how he rejects doing chores, but what happens when a partner understandably pushes back against this?
Because they will push back.
They will. This brings us to a really dark and clinical part of the text. How he interprets and manages female emotion. Specifically, what he calls managing emotional castration.
The author makes the highly controversial claim that women do not experience emotion the same way men do. Rather, they intentionally weaponize their emotions to control men.
He focuses specifically on tears and tantrums.
He cites a study again, providing his own interpretation of the data, claiming that 78% of women admitted to using crying as a tactic to stop an argument they were losing, rather than crying out of genuine sadness or grief.
He actually uses the phrase biochemical warfare.
Biochemical warfare.
He describes a woman crying as a calculated strategy designed to spike a man's cortisol and stress hormones, overwhelming his logic and forcing him to surrender his boundaries just to make the crying stop.
Taking a neutral, analytical look at how the text operates here, it is striking how heavily the author relies on severe clinical psychology terminology to frame everyday female behavior.
He really pathologizes it.
He doesn't just say women are emotional. He repeatedly asserts that modern women, because they have been unmoored from traditional patriarchal structures by feminism, are operating with subclinical borderline personality disorder, or BPD, traits.
He actually lists the diagnostic criteria for BPD, doesn't he?
He does. He lists fear of abandonment, extreme emotional volatility, splitting, which is viewing things as all good or all bad, and identity disturbance.
And he frames these severe psychiatric symptoms as the standard baseline operating system for the modern Western woman when she's placed under stress.
And he backs this up by citing a statistic from the National Institute of Mental Health, claiming that 75% of formal BPD diagnoses are female.
He uses this clinical data to argue that feminism conditioned an entire generation of women to believe that their emotional volatility is a superpower, a form of valid self-expression.
But in Riker's framework, it is nothing more than static noise that a strong leader needs to brutally cut through.
And the specific mechanism the author prescribes for cutting through that noise is what he calls the ICE protocol, or the calm cutoff.
The ICE protocol.
Riker insists that men must absolutely never reward emotional manipulation with empathy, active listening, or negotiation. Doing so, he argues, reinforces the bad behavior.
Instead, he advocates for absolute, chilling silence and physical withdrawal.
This is essentially the weaponization of the silent treatment. He describes a 24-hour ICE protocol where, after any act of disrespect or emotional outburst from the wife, the man completely withdraws his presence.
What does that look like in practice?
No eye contact, no speaking, no physical affection, no acknowledgement of her existence for a full 24 hours.
The examples he provides of men implementing this protocol highlight a complete automation of emotional detachment.
Automation is the perfect word for it.
He talks about one man who installed a custom tantrum timer app on his phone.
A tantrum timer.
Every single time his wife raised her voice or screamed, he didn't argue back. He simply tapped the app and walked out of the room for exactly 15 minutes.
He was systematically breaking the reward loop of her getting his attention through anger. When you read the next anecdote, what stands out isn't just the silence, it's the terrifying level of calculation.
The Alexa story.
Yes. There is a guy in Austin who literally programmed his Amazon Alexa smart home system to assist him in this.
I still can't believe this one.
Whenever his wife rolled her eyes at him, he would issue a voice command, and Alexa would announce over the house speakers, phase ice initiated.
He automated the silent treatment through smart home tech.
And according to Riker, this automation worked flawlessly. The text claims that within 10 days of implementing the Alexa protocol, the wife's eye-rolling and sarcastic remarks completely stopped.
The core message the author is delivering to you, the reader, is that weak men shout and argue, which lowers their status.
Right.
Strong men withdraw their presence entirely, forcing the woman to recalibrate her behavior to regain access to his resources and attention.
So he has locked down the internal environment, the finances, the chores, the emotional responses. But a marriage doesn't exist in a vacuum. What about external threats?
This transitions us perfectly into how the author views the outside world.
Specifically, his rules for social engineering and male proximity.
The author operates on the fundamental premise that you are not just managing a partner, you are managing an entire social ecosystem.
Because the outside world is constantly bleeding into the home.
He believes that if a woman has unrestricted access to the outside world, particularly through digital mediums, it is a direct and constant threat to the marital frame.
Therefore, he outlines incredibly strict rules for auditing a wife's digital life and her friendships.
Digital hygiene is a massive pillar of this ecosystem. Riker introduces what he calls the 10 texts per week threshold.
He claims to pull data from a national divorce registry showing that in couples where the wife texts another man more than 10 times a week, which, if you think about it, is less than 2 texts a day, they are 4.3 times more likely to end up divorced.
He views modern messaging apps, WhatsApp, Instagram DMs, Snapchat, as high-octane adultery accelerants.
Adultery accelerants.
He argues that these platforms create an invisible parasocial intimacy. Because the communication happens through a screen, it lowers a woman's inhibitions and creates a false sense of security, allowing emotional affairs to take root right in the middle of the marital living room.
It's not just men she is texting either. The author heavily targets female friendships as well.
He hates modern female friend groups.
He claims that modern women's friend groups do not support marriage. Instead, they normalize betrayal and actively view husbands as oppressors to be managed or escaped.
To validate this paranoia, he recounts the story of a financial analyst in Toronto. This man suspected that his wife's emotional wellness circle, which was essentially just a weekly wine night with her girlfriends, was detrimental to his marriage.
So applying Riker's framework, the husband secretly audited her WhatsApp messages.
And what he found, according to the text, confirmed every one of the author's warnings. The husband discovered that her friends were constantly validating her complaints.
They were calling the husband emotionally abusive simply because he expected her to cook dinner and maintain the house.
The author explicitly frames this friend group not as a support system, but as a hostile cult that was essentially workshopping and planning divorces for its members.
Workshopping divorces.
The husband's solution wasn't to talk to his wife about how it made him feel. He confronted the group, unilaterally shut down the wine nights, and permanently banned his wife from having any unapproved female friendships.
He engineered her social isolation to protect his frame.
And the text goes to even greater extremes when dealing with other men, introducing the male proximity principle.
Riker asserts a draconian zero-tolerance policy for any unchaperoned one-on-one contact with male figures. And he doesn't just mean ex-boyfriends.
No needs bosses, male doctors, coworkers, even a friendly barista at the coffee shop.
His reasoning ties back to the concept of hypergamy we discussed earlier. He argues that women are essentially hypergamous radars, constantly, subconsciously scanning their environment for higher status men.
In his view, infidelity isn't born from a lack of love, it is born from opportunity. Proximity and availability are the real engines of betrayal.
If you remove the proximity, you remove the biological temptation.
The anecdote he uses to illustrate this proximity danger is staggering.
It really is.
He writes about an engineer in Denver who discovered his wife was exchanging over 200 texts a day with a male coworker. The wife claimed they were just friendly and that nothing physical had happened.
A normal response might be marriage counseling or a heated argument, but what does this engineer do?
The engineer executes a masterclass in psychological dominance. He doesn't yell. He prints out every single one of the thousands of text messages.
He prints them all out.
He buys picture frames, frames the text logs, and systematically hangs them all over the living room wall, labeling it the emotional affair wall.
The emotional affair wall. He forces her to live inside the visual evidence of her betrayal.
The insight the author is hammering home here is that emotional infidelity is a statistical inevitability, a mathematical probability if a man does not aggressively police his wife's environment and completely, ruthlessly eliminate her unmonitored access to other men.
This level of environmental and behavioral control requires a very specific methodology to maintain. And the author does not shy away from what that methodology actually is.
No, he lays it out explicitly.
This brings us to what is perhaps the most provocative and unsettling theme of the entire deep dive: the disobedience protocol and his explicit parallels to animal training.
Riker repeatedly and entirely unapologetically compares the process of managing a wife to the process of training a dog.
He writes that while a dog obeys out of a pure instinct for pack loyalty, a woman obeys only when she actively fears losing her status, her resources, or her provider.
Objectively speaking, what the author is doing here is taking B.F. Skinner's foundational principles of operant conditioning, specifically the use of positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment, and applying them directly, without a filter, to human marriage.
He even formalizes this into what he calls the dog test.
The dog test.
He instructs his readers that whenever their wife refuses a request, talks back, or displays attitude, the man should pause and ask himself, would my dog do this?
If the answer is no, if a dog would not be allowed to growl at its owner without correction, the author states the man must correct the wife's behavior immediately, unemotionally, and firmly.
The text provides real-world examples of men implementing this operant conditioning, and they are surreal.
They are.
He talks about a Colorado firefighter who was dealing with a wife who had chronic anxiety and a habit of verbally defying him. The firefighter treated her exactly the same way he trained his rescue dog.
He instituted a system of silent hand signals.
He would use a flat palm facing down to command her to sit and calm down. He would point a single finger toward the kitchen to command her to cook. And if she started complaining, he would hold up a closed fist to signify, stop talking.
And the author's justification for treating a human being like a canine.
The author claims that within 3 months of using these hand signals, the wife's chronic anxiety completely vanished.
His psychological explanation is that her brain, overwhelmed by the endless choices of modern life, desperately needed firm direction, not emotional validation.
By treating her with the simple binary commands you would give an animal, he allegedly cured her neuroses.
Then there is the extreme technological application of this conditioning. The story of the Seattle neurosurgeon.
This one is wild.
This doctor literally purchased a professional polygraph machine and set it up in his garage. Every single month, he straps his wife into this machine and runs her through a comprehensive fidelity and spending scan,
actively monitoring her heart rate and galvanic skin response while interrogating her.
And it is crucial to understand how the author frames this. He explicitly says this isn't abuse. In his framework, implementing a monthly polygraph test is no different than a corporation running a quarterly financial audit.
He views it as creating a culture of absolute truth through the mechanics of deterrence and verification.
This philosophy of total conditioning extends deeply into physical appearance as well. In a subsection, the author chillingly titles Weight as Will.
Weight as will. Riker completely dismisses the idea that weight gain is a medical, genetic, or health issue.
He views a wife's weight gain purely as a behavioral symptom of disobedience, rebellion, and a physical rejection of the husband's leadership.
He actually coins the phrase that excess fat is stored rebellion.
Stored rebellion.
To correct this rebellion, he suggests mechanisms of absolute tyrannical control over the household's food and fitness routines.
He identifies the grocery cart as the real power seat in the marriage.
He tells men that if the wife is pushing the cart, she is pushing the agenda of the household.
Therefore, he mandates that men must immediately take over 100% of the grocery shopping to control the caloric intake of the home.
He provides examples of men enforcing this. One man instituted mandatory Sunday morning weigh-ins for his wife. She was required to stand on the scale in her workout clothes, right in the kitchen, in full view of their children.
The author promotes this because it actively uses shame and public accountability as behavioral motivators.
Another example is a man in Austin who changed the household Netflix and Wi-Fi passwords to the phrase, "go lift or go home," to physically force his wife to go to the gym before she could access entertainment.
But the ultimate leverage in this operant conditioning framework, the absolute highest value reward and punishment, is sexual access.
The author outlines what he calls the bedroom contract, asserting that physical intimacy is never a marital entitlement for the woman. It is strictly a consequence of her good behavior.
He details a mechanism called the sex fast protocol. If a wife is acting out of line or challenging the frame, the man is instructed to withhold all physical intimacy for a minimum of 21 days.
The logic here is to re-anchor the power dynamics, proving that the man is in complete control of his physical urges, thereby asserting his high status.
It goes even further into gamification with a sex voucher system. Riker describes a household where the wife has to earn a physical voucher each week.
How does she earn it?
Through a performance spreadsheet managed by the husband that meticulously tracks her daily respect levels, her weight management progress, and her emotional maturity.
If she breaks a rule or throws a tantrum, the voucher is immediately revoked.
According to Riker, this cold transactional system triggers her deep biological fear of losing sexual access to a high-status provider, forcefully terrorizing her into compliance.
As we step back from the micromanagement of the household, the author ties all of these extreme protocols into a much broader societal critique.
He vehemently and aggressively rejects modern feminism, describing it to his audience as a mimetic virus.
He uses that specific pathogenic terminology to frame feminism as a disease that has infected the biological hard drive of society, replacing the natural fulfillment of motherhood with misery, sterility, and the delusion of careerism.
Riker argues that a woman's true singular biological imperative is motherhood. He asserts that this must optimally occur within a strict 24 to 28-year-old fertility window.
He views women who delay childbirth to pursue degrees or careers as actively defying nature. Furthermore, he views working mothers as inherently damaged goods, claiming that their divided attention causes their children to suffer from vastly higher rates of clinical anxiety.
His advice to men is to dictate the timeline for pregnancy unilaterally and absolutely refuse to negotiate it.
Beyond the private sphere of the home and the bedroom, the author insists that this dominance must be performed in public, adhering to strict behavioral codes he calls the public face.
He emphasizes the rule of spatial dominance, drawing once again on primate behavior, as well as his interpretation of traditional Japanese etiquette. He mandates that a wife must physically walk 3 steps behind her husband at all times in public spaces.
And the logic here is purely about social perception. He argues that perception is reality in the biological marketplace.
If a wife walks ahead of a man, or even beside him as an equal, it signals to the rest of the male hierarchy that he lacks control over his own property, signaling his weakness to the tribe.
He also demands absolute public silence and deference from the wife, particularly in business settings. To illustrate the stakes, he shares a story about a high-powered Wall Street analyst who was hosting a $20 million client dinner.
During the dinner, his wife spoke up and gently interrupted him to correct a minor market projection he had made.
Rather than brushing it off or arguing with her in front of the clients, the analyst employs that ultimate frame control we discussed earlier. He simply stands up from the table, walks outside the restaurant, and sits on a cold bench for 45 minutes, abandoning her inside with his clients.
When she finally comes out, humiliated and begging for forgiveness, he doesn't yell. He just looks at her and says, "Not again."
The author uses this stark scene to assert that in high-stakes competitive environments, a woman speaking without explicit permission actively dilutes a man's authority and threatens his financial survival.
Which brings us to the final, ultimate culmination of Conrad Riker's framework, the exit clause.
If all the conditioning, the rituals, and the financial controls fail, what is the man's final move?
The author advises men to strip all romance from the concept of marriage and treat it exactly like a ruthless corporate performance contract.
If an employee at a corporation fails 3 consecutive performance reviews, they are fired. Riker argues that the exact same ruthless logic must apply to a wife.
He details a formal 3 strikes rule for marriage. Strike 1 might be an act of public defiance, like the dinner party interruption. Strike 2 could be consistent laziness or crossing a weight threshold. Strike 3 is lying, financial deceit, or betrayal.
He explicitly and coldly states that men should waste no time trying to rehabilitate a wife who fails these metrics. They must discard her and immediately replace her with a younger, more compliant partner.
The ultimate unassailable leverage a man has in this entire worldview, according to Riker, is his absolute unflinching willingness to walk away and upgrade.
To summarize this incredibly intense, dark, and provocative journey today, we have exhaustively explored Conrad Riker's comprehensive framework.
This is a worldview that doesn't just critique modern egalitarian ideals, it completely incinerates them.
He replaces the concept of equal partnership with a chillingly sterile system of absolute male dominance, heavily reliant on a specific interpretation of evolutionary psychology, the brutal application of behavioral operant conditioning, and strict, uncompromising hierarchical structures that govern every single breath of a relationship.
From the grocery cart to the bank account, right down to the physical space a woman is allowed to occupy.
Exactly.
And as a crucial final reminder to you, the listener, our goal today was to unpack this extreme material objectively and analytically. We have simply laid out the psychological mechanism, the arguments, and the specific worldview presented in the source text.
Right.
Navigating such polarizing and politically charged texts is about understanding the arguments and the profound anxieties that are shaping these very real, very influential subcultures without the show taking a side or passing ethical judgment.
Exactly. Before we wrap up, please remember to like and subscribe to the show so we can keep analyzing these cultural currents for you. The ebook we examine today is Whip Her Into Shape by Conrad Riker, which is available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. You can also follow the author's ongoing writings at Conrad and Riker on Substack.
And as we leave you today, I want to offer a final provocative thought for you to mull over on your own as you process everything we've discussed.
Leave us with it.
If human relationships and marriages are reduced entirely to cold biological power dynamics, strict corporate hierarchies, and the relentless mechanical behavioral conditioning of a partner, what happens to the very concept of authentic human connection? Does engineering absolute terrifying compliance eliminate the very possibility of freely given genuine love?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.